Chapter 1. The Whispers of Rust and Shadow. The rain in Highwatch wasn't a weeping rain. It was a grinding rain, laced with the metallic tang of perpetually damp stone and the muted groan of iron. It clung to the gray slate roofs of the city, slicked the cobblestones with a sheen that reflected the perpetual twilight cast by the citadel's towering spires, and most unsettlingly, seemed to carry a low, persistent hum. Tonight, the hum was particularly insistent, vibrating through the marrow of Commander Rhys Alaric's bones as he stood on the ramparts, his night-watch cloak plastered to his lean frame. Rhys was a man carved from granite and duty. 50 years etched themselves onto the lines of his face, a testament to years spent patrolling the shadowed alleys and guarding the citadel's perimeter. Had seen more bloodshed than he cared to remember, each stolen moment a sharp reminder of the war that had choked the life from the kingdom. For nearly a decade, the War of the Stolen Seconds. Below, the clash of steel was a dull, rhythmic thud against the rain's relentless percussion. The Battle of Black Ridge was a stalemate, a festering wound of mud, blood, and frozen resolve. The Sun-Breaker Horde, a tide of Orcish fury led by the brutal warlord Gordnak, had been locked in a brutal, exhausting defense against the human forces of Highwatch. For 6 months, neither side had gained an inch, each battle ending in a horrific, agonizing draw, punctuated by the chilling silence that followed a particularly potent burst of Chronos-Anchor magic. Rhys adjusted the grip on his wickedly curved blade, Stormbringer, named for the tempestuous nights it had tasted. He wasn't a warrior in the traditional sense. Rhys was a night watchman, a guardian against threats unseen, a tracker of anomalies. But tonight, the anomalies weren't monsters or bandits, they were something far stranger. It started subtly, a prickling unease under his skin. The rain seemed to shift, momentarily thickening, then thinning, mirroring the chaos of the battle below. Then came the shadows. Had noticed it first in his own reflection, a flickering, almost transparent distortion around the edges of his form. Dismissing it initially as the damp and the rain, had continued his observation. But now, across the field of battle, the shadows of the Orcish warriors were behaving strangely. They weren't simply cast by the flickering torchlight. They moved independently, darting, recoiling, as if reacting to something unseen. "Commander Alaric," a voice cut through the rain in the din of battle. It was Sergeant Kalen, a young man whose enthusiasm for duty was only matched by his lack of experience. "In reporting unusual readings, day. The chronometers are fluctuating wildly, and my shadow isn't keeping pace with the sun." Kalen's voice held a tremor of genuine fear. Rhys' own stomach tightened. "Chronometers. The very instruments the Human Astronomer-Royal, Lord Silas Viridian, used to manipulate the Chronos-Anchor stones, the keys to accessing the 25th hour." "Report," Rhys commanded, his voice low and gravelly. "Lord Viridian's readings have gone completely haywire, sir. He's attempting to amplify the anchor, but the energy, it's unstable. It's feeding back into the battle, amplifying the hesitation, the fear. The Orcs are freezing, paralyzed like statues. It's unnatural." Just then, a new anomaly registered on Rhys' senses. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer in the air, emanating from the direction of the Orcish lines. He signaled to Kalen, and a small squad of night watchmen, armed with newly designed unblinded mirrors, moved forward. The mirrors were a recent invention, born of a desperate need to counteract the effects of the 25th hour. They were designed to reflect the stolen time, pushing it back, attempting to restore the flow of the natural world. But tonight, they weren't working as intended. Instead of a clean reflection, the mirrors pulsed with an unnerving gray light, and the shadows of the Orcs grew darker, more substantial. "The mirrors are not reflecting time, sir," a young apprentice, Boren Stonehand, reported, his voice strained. "They're absorbing it. The shadows, they're not just moving. They're retreating." as if the orcs are being erased. That's when Reese noticed something truly horrifying. He looked down at his own feet. His shadow, normally a faithful mimic of his movements, was gone. Not obscured by the rain, not swallowed by the darkness, simply absent. A cold, sickening dread washed over him. It wasn't just the orcs. It was everyone. He felt a growing sense of disorientation, of temporal dissonance. The world around him seemed to be subtly shifting, like a painting struggling to hold its form. Then, from the furthest reaches of the battlefield, a low, grinding hum intensified, growing into a deafening roar. It was the sound of something being torn apart, of time itself unraveling, and Reese knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the Loom-Masters Viridian, Gordnak, and the Elven Princess-Regent Lyra weren't simply fighting for control of the 25th hour. They were actively destroying the future. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The roar hit Reese like a physical blow, instantly silencing the sporadic clang of steel and the guttural commands of the Sun-Breaker Horde. The rain, a relentless gray curtain moments before, seemed to thicken, swirling with an unnatural iridescent sheen. It wasn't merely wet, it felt viscous, as if attempting to cling to everything. The air tasted of ozone, and something ancient, something utterly devoid of warmth. Orin Stonehand, pale and shaking, stammered, "The mirrors, they're gone, Master Reese." Not just reflecting, but shattered. The gray light, it's spreading. Reese, a night watchman of the Kingdom of High Watch, pushed through the chaos, his boots sinking into the churned mud. He found a scene of absolute devastation. The once disciplined lines of the Orcish warriors were dissolving, not into dust, but into a shimmering gray void. An Orcish blacksmith's apprentice, Torvin, was a prime example, mid-swing with a hammer, frozen in an agonizingly slow, reverse motion. He was fading, his form becoming less solid with each agonizing second, the gray light consuming him from the inside out. Around him, other orcs were similarly afflicted, their forms collapsing into nothingness, their shouts becoming choked whispers swallowed by the expanding gray. "It's not just attacking them," Reese shouted, his voice strained against the growing hum. "It's unmaking them, like they're being erased from existence." He turned to see a group of High Watch soldiers, hardened veterans of countless skirmishes, paralyzed with a horror deeper than any battlefield experience. Their faces, etched with grim determination just moments ago, were now masks of vacant terror. They moved as if underwater, their limbs heavy, their thoughts sluggish, trapped in an endless loop of fragmented memories. He recognized Master Silas, the veteran swordsman, his face slack, his hand frozen mid-draw, a single, perfect drop of blood hanging suspended from his fingertip. The unblinded mirrors, they were meant to fight the effect, to pull it back, Silas mumbled, his voice a distorted echo. But they're not fighting. They're feeding it. As if on cue, a flicker of movement caught Riss' eye. He saw a young elven loom tender, Alara, frantically trying to repair a shattered section of one of the reflecting pools. But even as she reached for a fragment of polished obsidian, her own shadow retreated, dissolving into the oppressive gray. She screamed, a high-pitched, frantic sound that quickly choked into silence. The realization slammed into Reese with the force of the collapsing reality. The war wasn't about controlling the 25th hour, it was about accelerating its arrival. The Loom-Masters weren't trying to win, they were deliberately unraveling time itself. Just then, a figure emerged from the swirling gray, a towering Orcish warrior named Grok Bloodfang, who had been a particularly brutal and effective commander. He was solid. Not entirely, but significantly more substantial than the others who were dissolving. His eyes burned with a cold, unnatural intensity, and his skin pulsed with a faint gray luminescence. "The whispers grow stronger," Grok rumbled, his voice resonating with a chilling clarity. Viridian, he understands. He embraced the void. He sees the beauty in the stillness, the peace in the ending. Rourke raised a massive, scarred hand, and a wave of the gray light washed over Rhys. He braced himself, expecting oblivion, but instead he felt a pressure, a strange sensation of being stretched and compressed, as if his very being was being pulled apart, analyzed, understood. He saw flashes, not memories but possibilities, timelines branching out like chaotic rivers, all converging on a single, terrifying point, a world permanently trapped in an eternal midnight. He is not merely stealing time, Rhys gasped, fighting to maintain his composure. He is rewriting it. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos, cool, measured, and utterly devoid of emotion. Impressive, Night Watchman. You recognize the truth. It was Viridian, the Human Astronomer-Royal, standing calmly amidst the devastation, seemingly unaffected by the encroaching gray. He held a small, intricate device in his hand, the Chronos-Anchor, now pulsing with an unnerving violet light. You believe you can stop us? Viridian continued, a cruel smile playing on his lips. You are blinded by your linear perception of time. The 25th hour is not a theft, but a liberation. A release from the burden of choice, the agony of loss, the inevitability of decay. He gestured with the Chronos-Anchor, and the gray light intensified, spreading like a malignant tide. The humming escalated to a deafening roar. Rhys understood with a chilling certainty that they were running out of time. Not just the 25th hour, but time itself. As Viridian prepared to unleash the full power of the Chronos-Anchor, Rhys felt a desperate surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct for survival. He gripped his weapon, a simple but well-maintained dirk, and charged towards the Astronomer-Royal, driven by a single burning conviction that even in the face of oblivion, the present moment deserved a chance. Chapter 3. The Gears of Oblivion. The air shimmered, thick with the violet radiation emanating from Viridian's Chronos-Anchor. Rhys, fueled by a desperate, almost reckless courage, closed the distance, his dirk a silver streak against the deepening gloom. Viridian didn't flinch. He merely adjusted the device, his movements precise, deliberate, as if calibrating a deadly instrument. The Chronos-Anchor pulsed brighter, bathing the ruined battlefield in an unsettling, ethereal glow. Around them, the remnants of the Sun-Breaker Horde and the Midnight-Weave Elves, disoriented and struggling to comprehend the unfolding catastrophe, were slowly being consumed by the expanding gray. You misunderstand the nature of existence, Viridian said, his voice amplified by the device, carrying a chilling resonance that seemed to vibrate within Rhys' very bones. Time isn't a river to be controlled, but a tapestry to be reshaped. We are not stealing, we are weaving. Suddenly, a jarring clang echoed across the battlefield, disrupting Viridian's carefully orchestrated display. From the heart of the Orcish lines, a figure emerged, Borin, the blacksmith's apprentice. He wasn't wielding a weapon, not in the traditional sense. Instead, he carried a massive, hand-forged hammer, its head glowing with an intense, concentrated heat. He moved with a terrifying, unthinking fury, a raw surge of energy channeled through his youth. The fear is a trap, Borin roared, his voice echoing with the unbridled fury of a forge. You offer us stagnation, a silent tomb. We will burn away your illusion. Viridian's calm facade cracked. He instinctively reached for a small obsidian shard embedded in his wrist, a counter-device designed to regulate the flow of temporal energy. But it was too late. Borin's hammer struck with a force that shattered the obsidian, sending shards flying like dark rain. The shock wave of heat pulsed outwards, not just melting metal but disrupting the very weave of the 25th hour around them. Foolish brute! Viridian shouted, his voice strained. You can't comprehend the complexity of the operation. As Borin continued his relentless assault, Rhys realized The Orcish strategy wasn't one of calculated aggression, but of pure, unadulterated, reactive force. It was a blunt instrument, shattering the carefully constructed illusion of control. This, he understood, was what the Loom-Masters truly sought, a constant state of chaos to maximize the potential for stolen time. Meanwhile, a different disruption was occurring closer to the shattered remains of the Elven encampment. Elara, the loom tender, had been frantically working, her fingers moving with a speed that defied logic. She was using a modified weaver's spindle, not to manipulate threads of silk, but to unravel the very fabric of the Princess-Regent's enchanted robes. The robes, woven with captured moments of regal composure and effortless grace, were the key to maintaining the Regent's control over her temporal loops. As the spindle bit into the shimmering fabric, a plume of gray dust erupted, coalescing into a swirling vortex around the Regent. Her movements became jerky, her face a mask of confusion and growing panic. The gray intensified, drawing her in, until with a final agonizing shriek, she dissolved into nothingness, a fleeting echo of a perfectly poised queen. "The threads are unraveling," Rhys yelled, attempting to coordinate the chaotic efforts. "Focus! We need to exploit this." But Viridian was rapidly consolidating his power. The Chronos-Anchor pulsed with an almost blinding violet light, and he began to chant in a language that resonated with an ancient, unsettling power, a language of temporal geometry, of collapsing timelines and fractured realities. The gray tide grew, threatening to engulf everything. Then, a sudden, unexpected intervention. From the shadows of a shattered watchtower, a figure emerged: Lyra, a young elf of the Midnight-Weave, one of the few who hadn't succumbed to the disorientation and terror. She wasn't wielding a weapon, but carrying a single, perfectly formed crystal, a fragment of solidified moonlight, imbued with the essence of the present moment. "The pattern is flawed," Lyra cried, holding the crystal aloft. "You are not shaping time, you are creating a void." As she spoke, the crystal emitted a pulse of pure white light, momentarily disrupting the violet energy of the Chronos-Anchor. The gray tide faltered, its advance slowed. Viridian, visibly enraged, unleashed a wave of temporal energy at Lyra, attempting to freeze her in a timeless loop. But Lyra, anticipating the move, instinctively raised the crystal, channeling the energy back at Viridian. The blast impacted the Chronos-Anchor, causing it to stutter, its violet light flickering erratically. Rhys seized the opportunity. He didn't charge Viridian, recognizing the futility of a direct assault. Instead, he focused on the immediate task, securing a pathway to the Astronomer-Royal, relying on Boren's chaotic aggression to keep Viridian preoccupied. "Bow! Bearblue!" As he moved, he noticed a subtle shift in the air, a ripple in the fabric of reality. He realized with growing horror that Viridian wasn't merely manipulating time, he was distorting it, creating a localized field of temporal dissonance. "He's not just controlling time," Rhys murmured to himself, his hand instinctively gripping his dirk tighter. "He's bending it. Like a sculptor shaping clay, he's warping our perception, our very existence." The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a battle for time, it was a battle for reality itself. Chapter 4. The Sculptor of Time. The air in the grand observatory crackled with a dangerous energy, a dissonance that tasted of ozone and forgotten ages. Viridian's distortion field was expanding, the violet glow of the Chronos-Anchor pulsing with a frantic, almost violent rhythm. Rhys, Boren, and Lyra circled the Astronomer-Royal, a towering figure encased in a shimmering bubble of manipulated time. Lord Silas Blackwood, the man who'd spent his life charting the heavens, was now a statue of polished gray, his face frozen in a perpetual expression of horrified comprehension. Boren, predictably, was a whirling storm of frustrated aggression. He slammed his hammer against the obsidian floor, each blow echoing with a jarring, displaced sound, a hammer strike from a moment before, a second after, layered upon itself. "He's mocking us!" he roared, his voice thick with guttural fury. "The old man's twisting our attacks, turning our strength against us." Lyra, ever the pragmatist, continued to manipulate the crystal, a thin stream of white light constantly pushing back against Viridian's violet assault. The rhythmic pulse of the Chronos-Anchor was growing weaker, its violet light sputtering like a dying candle. Rhys, however, remained silent, his eyes scanning the room, his focus entirely on the subtle distortions in the air. He wasn't just reacting to Viridian's attacks, he was meticulously studying the nature of the distortion itself. "It's not about force," Rhys finally said, his voice low and measured. "Viridian isn't trying to overpower us with raw temporal energy. He's reshaping the resonance. He's deliberately creating inconsistencies, exploiting the fragile architecture of our perception." Viridian, sensing Rhys' growing understanding, intensified his attack. The violet light flared, coalescing into a shimmering vortex around the Astronomer-Royal. Suddenly, the room shifted. The constellations on the massive orrery spun wildly, not in their natural orbits, but in a chaotic, fractured dance. Shadows flickered and elongated, blurring the edges of reality. Boren, caught in the escalating chaos, stumbled, momentarily disoriented, his hammer clattering to the floor. "He's amplifying our anxieties," Lyra shouted, struggling to maintain the crystal's protective field. "He's feeding off our fear, our hesitation. That's why the Loom-Masters were so effective. They built the war on manufactured panic." Rhys ignored her, his gaze fixed on the warped patterns in the air. He noticed that the distortions weren't random. They seemed to be centered around specific points, around moments of intense emotional response, Boren's rage, Lyra's anxiety, even the tremors of Salas' frozen existence. "It's a symphony of dissonance," Rhys announced, a sudden clarity hardening his features. "He's not just manipulating time, he's sculpting it. He's shaping our reality using our own emotional vulnerabilities as a chisel." He turned to Boren, noticing the blacksmith's apprentice clutching his head, fighting against the disorientation. "Stop fighting the distortion, Boren. Don't react. Let it flow through you. Become part of the pattern." Boren, bewildered but trusting Rhys' newfound direction, slowly lowered his hammer. He took a deep breath, focusing on the relentless rhythm of his own heartbeat, trying to find a center within the swirling chaos. As he did, something remarkable happened. The violet vortex around Silas Blackwood began to stabilize, its frantic pulses becoming more regular, less violent. "He's adapting," Lyra gasped, her eyes widening. "He's learning to anticipate our responses." Rhys realized the truth. Viridian wasn't simply a master of time, he was a master of psychological warfare, a temporal sculptor. And Silas Blackwood, trapped within his bubble of manipulated time, was his most vital creation. He moved swiftly, sidestepping the lingering echoes of Viridian's distortion, and approached the Astronomer-Royal, drawing his dirk. "We've been focusing on the anchor," Rhys said, his voice tight with urgency. "But the true target isn't the object, it's the effect. Viridian's control isn't based on the flow of time, it's based on Silas' perception of it." He raised his dirk, aiming not for Salas' body, but for the shimmering bubble protecting him, the very locus of the distortion. As Rhys plunged his dirk into the bubble, a searing white light erupted, consuming the violet energy in an incandescent flash. The room shuddered violently. Silas Blackwood's statue didn't shatter, didn't crumble. Instead, he began to shift, his features subtly altering, becoming smoother, more youthful. The frozen horror in his eyes dissolved, replaced with a flicker of nascent recognition. "The pattern is flawed," Salas' voice echoed, weak but clear, as he took a halting step forward, shaking his head as if emerging from a long, dreamless sleep. You are unraveling the tapestry. Viridian shrieked, a guttural sound of pure, horrified frustration, as his carefully constructed reality began to unravel. The distortion field collapsed, the violet light receding, and the orrery settled back into its proper rotation. But the damage was done. The Loom-Masters' grand scheme was collapsing, exposed for the cruel manipulation it truly was. Chapter 5. The Echo of Choice. The air in the observatory hung thick with the scent of ozone and a subtle, unsettling sweetness, like overripe fruit. Silas Blackwood, the Astronomer-Royal, stood blinking, disoriented, amidst the restored precision of his orrery. His clothes, once meticulously tailored with threads spun from captured starlight, were now subtly frayed, as if having aged a century in a single moment. He looked not at Rhys, nor at Viridian, who stood frozen in stunned disbelief, but at the massive, intricately crafted clock, dominating the room, the chronometer prime, the heart of his temporal control. You destroyed it, Silas rasped, his voice a dry, brittle whisper. My life's work. Generations dedicated to understanding time. To harnessing its subtle currents. Rhys didn't respond immediately. Had expected a defensive outburst, a desperate attempt to regain control. But Silas' reaction was unnerving, not rage, not fear, but a profound, desolate sorrow. You understood then, Rhys said finally, his hand instinctively tightening on the hilt of his dirk. You understood that it wasn't about manipulating time, but about exploiting perception of. Viridian, recovering his composure with a guttural growl, surged forward, swinging a fist crafted from obsidian that pulsed with residual violet energy. You fool! You've unleashed chaos. The tailor will be furious. Let him be. Lara, the elven loom tender, stepped forward, her silver hair shimmering in the renewed starlight. The chaos you've presented is far more manageable than the stagnation you were attempting to impose. She gestured towards the shattered remnants of the violet field. We see now the true cost of your ambition. A world emptied of potential, stripped of the vibrant, messy beauty of choice. The arrival of the human night watchman, Kaelin and Lyra, and the Orcish blacksmith's apprentice, Boric, added another layer of complexity. They'd arrived just as Rhys' initial attack had unfolded, witnessing the unraveling of Silas' control with a mixture of horror and burgeoning hope. It's like watching a painting being erased, Kaelin, a young man with a perpetually weary expression, observed, his gaze fixed on the orrery. Every movement, every shimmer of the spheres, now feels vulnerable. Boric, surprisingly, spoke with a quiet intensity. The blacksmiths in my clan, they speak of unhesitation, a state of focused action, born of pure intent. It's said that true strength isn't about brute force, but about the unwavering will to act, to choose. He looked at Silas, then at Viridian, a grim understanding dawning in his eyes. You weren't weaving time, you were stealing it. You were robbing people of their agency. The realization spread amongst the assembled forces like a ripple. The humans, initially focused on reclaiming their stolen seconds, now understood the insidious nature of the war. The Orcs, accustomed to overwhelming force, felt a disquieting sense of vulnerability. The Elves, attuned to the subtle currents of magic, recognized the terrifying elegance of the manipulation. Silas was right, Alara admitted, her voice softening. We were attempting to impose order, but order without choice is merely tyranny. The tailor seeks not to control time, but to erase it to create a permanent, stagnant present. Suddenly, a tremor ran through the observatory. The orrery shuddered violently, its spheres spinning out of alignment. The violet energy, though diminished, began to coalesce around Silas Blackwood, not as a defensive bubble, but as a growing, hungry vortex. He reached out a hand, his fingers shimmering with a sickly amethyst light. "Don't you understand?" he screamed, his voice rising above the din. "The future is nothing but a series of probabilities, and I am merely selecting the most favorable one." Rhys understood then. The coup of the Dawning wasn't merely about stopping the Loom-Masters. It was about shattering the fundamental premise of their existence, the belief that they held dominion over time's flow. He raised his dirk once more, not aiming for Silas this time, but for the nascent vortex, for the very seed of the 25th hour's creation. "We won't let you finish what you started." As Rhys plunged the dirk into the violet vortex, a blinding flash consumed the observatory. This time, however, the light didn't erase, it amplified. It seemed to gather the scattered fragments of time, the echoes of moments lost and stolen, and focus them onto a single point, the chronometer prime. The clock's gears ground to a halt. The hands froze, suspended in a perpetual, agonizing stillness. And within the mechanism, a single perfect second, utterly unaffected by the chaos, shone with a brilliant, unwavering light. "The pattern is broken," Silas whispered, his voice fading, his body dissolving into a shower of violet dust. "The choice is return." Chapter 6. Echoes of the Broken Clock. The silence that descended after Silas' dissolution wasn't the heavy, expectant quiet before a storm, but a brittle, shimmering stillness. The observatory, once a hub of frantic calculations and arcane energy, felt hollow. Dust motes danced in the fractured beams of moonlight, filtering through the shattered dome, each one a tiny, frozen echo of a moment. Rhys, his dirk still slick with violet residue, felt a profound exhaustion settle over him, a weariness that extended beyond mere physical exertion. Had touched something fundamental, something terrifyingly beautiful, the core of time itself. Around him, the remnants of the coup of the Dawning began to resolve. Kalen, the Orcish blacksmith's apprentice, was meticulously gathering the fragments of the Iron-Shaman's totems, each piece now radiating a muted violet heat. He worked with a grim efficiency, his calloused hands moving with a practiced grace born of years spent shaping metal under intense heat. He didn't speak, his usual boisterous laughter absent, replaced by a quiet contemplation. The shockwave had unleashed had been far more potent than they'd anticipated, and its effects were still rippling through the shattered remains of the shaman's ritual space. Across the vast chamber, Alara, the elven loom tender, knelt beside the sunder spindle. The intricate silver device, once humming with stolen time, was now inert, its polished surface coated in a delicate layer of gray. She meticulously gathered the tangled strands of silk that had once formed the Princess-Regent's robes, carefully examining each knot, each loop. "Whoop! The threads still retain a residue," she murmured, her voice laced with a deep sadness. The echoes of her decisions, her desires woven into the fabric of this disruption. The king's envoy, Lord Alaric of Highwatch, a man forged in the relentless practicality of a kingdom built on order and vigilance, approached Rhys, his face etched with a mixture of relief and bewildered awe. Bewildered awe. "The chronometer prime, it's stable," he stammered, gesturing towards the clock. The violet vortex had vanished completely, leaving behind only the clock itself, now radiating a gentle, silvery light. "But it's not functioning. Not in the way we understood it." "It simply is." Rhys nodded, his gaze fixed on the frozen hands. "The pattern is broken," he repeated, the words carrying a weight far greater than their simple utterance. Silas sought to control, that is, to shape it according to his own calculations. He failed. But in his failure, he revealed the truth: time isn't a river to be steered, but a sea to be navigated. Suddenly, a low hum resonated through the observatory, growing in intensity. It wasn't a mechanical sound, but something more akin to a sigh, a breath of existence. The silvery light emanating from the chronometer prime intensified, and the air shimmered with a barely perceptible distortion. From within the clock's intricate mechanism, a figure began to coalesce. It wasn't a solid form, not initially. Instead, it was a shimmering, translucent projection, shaped vaguely like a man, but composed entirely of light and temporal echoes. It was an echo of the clock itself, a fragment of the moments it had witnessed, the rhythms it had measured. This Echo Clockmaster, as Reese instinctively recognized it, wasn't an individual. It was the memory of the chronometer prime, the sum total of all the seconds it had marked. It reached out a hand, and a single, perfect second identical to the one Reese had isolated detached itself from the mechanism and floated towards him. "You have touched the source," the Echo Clockmaster's voice resonated, ancient and layered, with the weight of countless years. The moment before the moment. The root from which all time springs. Kalen and Alara, alerted by the shift in energy, rushed to Riss' side. Kalen instinctively raised his hammer, ready to defend, while Alara, guided by an almost primal instinct, began to weave a small, intricate net from strands of her own shimmering cloak, attempting to contain the expanding projection. "The Loom-Masters sought to hoard time," the Echo Clockmaster continued, its form flickering slightly. "They believed they could control its flow, bend it to their will. But time is not a commodity to be possessed. It is a current to be understood, a force to be respected." It paused, and a wave of images flooded Riss' mind, glimpses of civilizations rising and falling, of stars being born and dying, of countless iterations of possibility, all unfolding within the endless expanse of time. He saw the Loom-Masters, consumed by their ambition, trapped in a perpetual loop of their own making, lost within the 25th hour. "The 25th hour," the Echo Clockmaster said, its voice laced with sorrow. "A tempting illusion, born of fear and desperation. But it is ultimately a cage." "What do we do?" Reese asked, his voice strained. The sheer immensity of the revelation threatened to overwhelm him. "You have already done the most important thing," the Echo Clockmaster replied. "You have chosen to observe, to understand, to act, not from a desire to control, but from a need to correct. Now, you must guide the flow. You must become the guardians of the present moment." With a final, shimmering flicker, the Echo Clockmaster dissolved back into the chronometer prime, leaving behind only the steady, unwavering light of that single, perfect second. The humming subsided, and the observatory fell silent once more, but it was no longer a silence of emptiness, but one pregnant with possibility. Reese looked at Kalen and Alara, his eyes filled with a newfound resolve. "The war is over," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "But our vigilance must never cease." Chapter 7. The Thread of Reconciliation. The immediate aftermath of the coup of the dawning was a disorienting, beautiful chaos. The remnants of the shattered chronometers, the frozen forms of the aged Astronomer-Royal, and the tangled silks of the Princess-Regent served as stark reminders of the near destruction of their world. But the air itself felt different, lighter, clearer, as though a suffocating blanket had been lifted. Reese, Kalen, and Alara, hailed as saviors by their respective peoples, found themselves thrust into a position of unprecedented responsibility. The Kingdom of High Watch, initially wary of the seemingly miraculous intervention of Orcs and Elves, cautiously opened its gates. King Alaric, a pragmatic warrior haunted by the near-fatal consequences of blind ambition, recognized the truth in Riss' words. The war was a distraction, a weapon forged by vanity. "We nearly traded our future for a phantom kingdom." His first decree was to dismantle the elaborate network of surveillance mirrors and temporal wards built to detect any residual influence of the Loom-Masters. The Sun-Breaker Horde, under the leadership of Grok Stonehand, the newly appointed war chief, was a far more complicated affair. Years of ingrained aggression, stoked by the endless cycle of conflict with the humans and elves, made true understanding a difficult feat. Grok, a towering orc with eyes that mirrored the turbulent skies of a storm, initially viewed the dismantling of the chronometer totems with suspicion, seeing it as a sign of weakness. It was Kalen, with his innate understanding of the ancient Orcish rituals and connection to the earth, who slowly began to bridge the gap. He showed Grok how the meticulously crafted totems, designed to control time, had become a parasitic burden, draining the Horde's vitality and fueling their destructive impulses. "The stone does not hold time, War Chief," Kalen argued, demonstrating how the totems vibrated with a discordant energy. "It consumes it. Like a leech feeding on lifeblood." Grok, sensing the undeniable truth in Kalen's words, ordered the destruction of the remaining totems with a solemn ritual, a physical release of decades of pent-up fury. The Elven response was perhaps the most profound. The Midnight-Weave Elves, led by Lyra Silverstream, the newly appointed regent after the dissolution of the Princess-Regent's illusion, had spent centuries studying the mechanics of the 25th hour. They had understood the Tailor's manipulation from the outset, recognizing the inherent danger in tampering with the flow of time. Lyra, a woman of quiet intensity and unwavering focus, immediately began to establish a weave council, comprised of scholars, artisans, and loom tenders from every elven settlement. Their task was to develop methods for not just mitigating the threat of the 25th hour, but also for understanding and harmonizing with the strange temporal energies that now pulse throughout the world. Rhys, Kalen, and Alara spent their days traveling amongst these newly forged alliances. They discovered that the initial distrust was rapidly dissolving, replaced by a shared recognition of the catastrophe they had narrowly averted. They weren't just brokering peace, they were laying the foundations for a new understanding of reality, one where the past wasn't a resource to be exploited, and the future wasn't a battlefield to be fought upon. During a council meeting held in a neutral grove bathed in the ethereal light of the newly stabilized time stream, an old elven weaver named Scylla spoke. The Loom-Masters were not malicious children. They were simply lost, trapped in the echo of their own desires, seeking a sense of control in a universe that is fundamentally chaotic. He paused, his wrinkled hand tracing the intricate patterns woven into a shimmering tapestry. The tailor, he merely offered them a reflection of that desire. A beautiful, seductive lie. "But the lie nearly destroyed us all," Rhys said, his voice heavy with the weight of what they had witnessed. Silas nodded. "Indeed. And now we must learn from that. We must guard against the allure of easy answers, against the temptation to bend reality to our will. We must embrace the fluidity, the inherent uncertainty of the present moment." As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, dancing shadows across the grove, Rhys felt a renewed sense of purpose. The initial panic had subsided, replaced by a quiet determination. They were not just rebuilding a kingdom, they were rebuilding a way of thinking. The threat of the 25th hour remained, a constant reminder of the fragility of time, but now, armed with understanding, they were ready to face it, not as warriors, but as guardians of the delicate, precious thread of the present moment. Chapter 8. The Echoes of the Loom. The council meeting concluded with a shared silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant cry of a nighthawk. The grove, once a place of tense deliberation, now held a fragile peace, a testament to the near catastrophe averted. Rhys, Silas, and the representatives of High Watch, the Sun-Breaker Horde, and the Midnight-Weave Elves, Lord Commander Kalen, the grizzled veteran, and Princess Lyra, newly returned from the edges of the ravaged borders, moved with a cautious deliberation, acutely aware of the precarious balance they'd restored. The immediate task was the reconstruction of the Chronos-Anchor sites, each once a shimmering nexus of stolen time, now scarred and fractured. The human engineers, led by Master Alistair Finch, were already deploying intricate clockwork mechanisms, designed not to capture time, but to stabilize it to create resonant fields that would repel the encroaching influence of the 25th hour. The initial calibrations are promising, Alistair reported, his brow furrowed in concentration as he adjusted a series of polished brass gears. We're achieving a measurable resistance. However, it's a delicate process. Overstabilization risks creating localized temporal distortions echoes, essentially where the flow of time becomes erratic. We've observed brief instances of objects momentarily reverting to previous states, a disconcerting, almost nauseating effect. Lyra, ever pragmatic, interjected, "Then we must reinforce the containment fields." The tailor was drawn to the instability. We cannot afford to provide him with another foothold. Kalen, the Orcish leader, remained impassive, his massive frame a silent sentinel. He spoke rarely, his pronouncements delivered with a measured weight. The Iron-Shaman's methods were disruptive. Raw force can shatter a thing, but it cannot mend a spirit. We need to understand why he pursued this path. There was a hunger in his eyes, a desperate need for control. It is a sickness that lurks within the heart of ambition. Silas, observing the tense exchange, offered a quiet observation. "Control is an illusion, my young ones. Time is not a tool to be mastered, but a river to be navigated." The Iron Shaman sought to dam it, to direct its flow to his will. He failed to recognize that the river will always find its course. He gestured towards the central tapestry, now woven with threads of recovered time, its patterns shifting subtly with the changing light. The Loom-Masters sought to fix a broken thread, to mend a tear in their own perceptions. But the most profound repairs are not made with force but with understanding. As the work continued, a peculiar phenomenon began to emerge. Small, localized echoes of the 25th hour began to manifest fleeting glimpses of a monochrome world, silent and devoid of movement. They were brief, barely perceptible, yet unsettlingly persistent. Alistair realized they were connected to the stability efforts, the attempt to solidify the present moment, creating a negative feedback loop, amplifying the tailor's influence. "As if we're inadvertently feeding him," he exclaimed, pointing to a shimmering distortion above one of the anchor sites. "The more we fight the distortion, the stronger it becomes. We're caught in a feedback loop, trying to contain a leak with an ever-growing dam." A solution began to formulate, a radical one proposed by Reese. "Silas is right. We're fighting the chaos. We need to embrace it. We need to introduce the unpredictable into the equation." He turned to Lyra, who nodded in agreement. "We need to create controlled moments of disorientation. Moments of heightened awareness, of focused intent. Something that disrupts the flow of time, that introduces a counter-signal to the tailor's manipulations." The proposal led to a daring plan. Utilizing ancient elven techniques, they would construct a series of resonance stones, meticulously attuned to the chaotic flow of time. These stones, when activated in unison, would generate a pulse of pure, unadulterated present moment, a concentrated wave of awareness that would momentarily disrupt the 25th hour's influence. The ritual was complex, requiring the synchronized movement of warriors from all three nations, a human night watchman, an Orcish blacksmith's apprentice, and an elven loom tender, weaving their actions together with a precision honed over weeks of shared training. As they activated the stones, a palpable shift occurred in the grove. The echoes intensified, not diminishing as expected, but swirling into intricate patterns, reflecting the chaotic beauty of a disrupted timeline. Suddenly, Reese understood. "It's not about stopping the echoes," he shouted over the rising chorus of the resonant stones. "It's about learning to dance with them." The tailor doesn't control time, he simply reacts to it. We need to demonstrate that we are not passive observers, but active participants in the flow. And as the last stone pulsed with resonant energy, the echoes didn't dissipate. They coalesced, forming a shimmering, translucent image, a figure clad in flowing robes, a master weaver meticulously crafting a tapestry of pure, unfettered time. The Tailor of Twilight, finally visible, a terrifying embodiment of their near destruction. He reached out, his hand extending towards the newly activated resonance stones, a desperate, frantic plea echoing across the fragmented reality. The battle wasn't over. It had simply begun anew, this time, not with weapons and strategy, but with the profound understanding that the key to survival lay not in controlling time, but in mastering the art of being fully, irrevocably present. Chapter 9. The Looms. The loom's reflection, the air in the chronarium, once thick with the discordant hum of the resonance stones, now thrummed with a quieter, more focused energy. Rhys, Chaol, and Lyra, standing within the circle of pulsing stone, felt a strange resonance within themselves, a heightened awareness, a sense of being acutely, frighteningly here. The shimmering image of the tailor, projected with unsettling clarity, remained suspended, a frantic brushstroke against the fabric of reality, yet he seemed weaker. The desperate pleas had faded, replaced by a dull, almost mournful stillness. "His diminished," Chaol observed, his typically gruff voice hushed with awe. "The energy we poured into disrupting the echoes, it wasn't just a reaction, it was an interruption. He doesn't want to be observed, he needs the chaos." Lyra, ever the meticulous observer, was tracing the patterns in the air with a slender finger. The tapestry he was weaving, it wasn't just time. It was potential. Each fragment he gathered, each stolen second, represented a possible future, a path not taken. And by forcing him to confront his own creation, we forced him to confront the infinite possibilities he was suppressing. Rhys, fueled by the sudden clarity, stepped forward. "We need to understand his motivation. Why does he crave this stolen time? Is it simply power, or is there something deeper, a wound he's trying to mend?" He turned to Chaol and Lyra. "Chaol, you've worked with the stones for weeks. Can you detect any residual patterns, any echoes of his intent?" Chaol, with a grunt, began manipulating the resonance stones. He wasn't attempting to control them this time, but rather to listen. The stones responded with a delicate cascade of light, projecting complex geometric shapes onto the far-wall fractals that shifted and evolved with dizzying speed. "It's layered," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "He's not just taking time as repairing it, but his method is flawed. He's stitching reality together with fragments, creating a patchwork existence. The core, it is unstable. It's like a tapestry with a gaping hole. It's not a solution. It's a symptom." Suddenly, a low, resonant chime echoed through the chronarium. Lyra stiffened, her eyes fixed on the tailor's image. "He's reacting," she whispered, her voice laced with urgency. "He's trying to influence us to pull us back into his pattern." The tailor's image began to shift, the flowing robes morphing into a more defined form, a slender androgynous figure with eyes that glowed with the captured light of countless stolen moments. He raised a hand, and a miniature tapestry began to materialize around him, a swirling vortex of blues and silvers representing the 25th hour. "You fight a losing battle," he said, his voice a haunting blend of ages and dimensions. "Time is a river, and you seek to dam it. But a river will always find a way. I offer you not control, but sanctuary. A place where the anxieties of your fleeting existence fade away, where you can simply be." The offer was tempting, a siren's call to the weary warriors. Rhys stepped forward, his hand instinctively reaching for his blade. "We appreciate the gesture, Tailor, but we refuse. Your sanctuary is a tomb. It's a denial of life, of purpose, of the precious moments we are entrusted with." As Rhys spoke, a wave of iridescent energy pulsed from the tailor's image, attempting to coalesce around him, to envelop him in a comforting, timeless embrace. But this time, it wasn't meeting with resistance. Instead, the combined power of the resonance stones, amplified by the three heroes' focused intent, reacted with a devastating force. The miniature tapestry shattered, not with violence, but with an exquisite, heartbreaking elegance. "You misunderstand," the tailor's voice echoed, now strained and distorted. "I'm not offering oblivion. I'm offering completion. To perfect the moment. To remove the uncertainty." Kale, sighting on the shift in the tailor's intent, shouted, as trying to erase the pain, the regret, the choice. "He's not a weaver, has a sensor." As Kale spoke, a spectral hand reached out from the tailor's image, attempting to grasp at a small, intricately carved wooden bird resting on a nearby table, a gift from Riss' grandmother, a symbol of resilience and hope. Without hesitation, Riss lunged forward, intercepting the spectral hand with his blade. The blade passed through the tailor's image, not inflicting damage, but severing the connection, shattering the illusion. The tailor's image flickered, weakened, and then, with a final mournful sigh, dissolved entirely, leaving behind only the silent hum of the resonance stones. "The loom's reflection is broken," Lyra announced, her voice filled with a profound sense of relief. "The tailor is no more." But as the last vestiges of the tailor vanished, a new resonance emerged from the stones, not a frantic scramble for stolen moments, but a steady, almost melancholic rhythm, like the slow, deliberate ticking of a forgotten clock. The echoes, once chaotic and disruptive, now seemed to carry a faint whisper, a reminder of the near catastrophe they had averted, and a solemn promise to cherish every single, precious second. The war, it seemed, was won, not with weapons, but with understanding, a recognition that the greatest battles are not fought against external foes, but against the shadows within ourselves. Chapter 10. The weight of the present. The silence that followed the tailor's dissolution was thick, almost oppressive. The resonance stones, previously throbbing with chaotic energy, now pulsed with a low, steady beat, a rhythm that seemed to resonate not just within the stone, but within the very bones of the assembled forces. The air itself felt different, lighter, as if 1,000 invisible weights had been lifted. Kale, Riss, and Lyra stood amidst the wreckage of the observatory, the remnants of the tailor's projection shimmering faintly on the floor. The Astronomer-Royal statue, a grizzled figure frozen in an expression of horrified comprehension, remained a stark monument to the near extinction of time. Around them, the armies of High-Watch Sun-Breaker Horde and Midnight-Weave Elves shifted uneasily, a palpable tension still clinging to the air. "It's quiet," grunted Borin Stonehand, a veteran Orcish blacksmith's apprentice, scratching his beard thoughtfully. "Too quiet. After all that chaos, you expect silence?" "The silence is a good sign, Borin," Riss said, sheathing his blade, the silver of the shadow kiss gleaming in the newly returned light. "It means the process is complete. The tailor is gone." Lyra, ever the pragmatist, turned her attention to the resonance stones. "The echoes are fading, but they still carry a subtle resonance. We need to understand what the tailor was truly trying to accomplish. He didn't simply steal time, he sought to erase the experience of it." The realization hung heavy in the air. Kale, initially brimming with fervent conviction, now paced, his brow furrowed. "He wasn't just a censor. He was a collector of sorrow. He saw our triumphs and failures, our love and loss, and decided they were too potent. He wanted to erase the capacity for feeling entirely." A murmur rippled through the assembled ranks. The concept was unsettling, a chilling echo of the tailor's motivation. To deny the very essence of being human, or Orcish, or Elven, to strip away the ability to grieve, to hope, to choose, seemed an act of ultimate destruction. "We must examine the stones more closely," Lyra announced, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on one of the stones. "Perhaps there are residual patterns, echoes of the tailor's intent." We need to understand why he sought to eliminate the very thing that makes us who we are. As they delved into the analysis, a small contingent of elven loom tenders, led by the elder, Sylvanus, approached with a strange device, a harmonic resonator, crafted from polished moonstone and spun silver. Sylvanus explained, his voice a low, measured tone. The tailor's influence manifested as a disruption of temporal harmony. The resonance stones, originally attuned to the ebb and flow of moments, were warped, creating a funnel for his bleak vision. This resonator can attempt to re-establish that natural rhythm. The loom tender began to meticulously adjust the resonator, focusing its energy on the stones. A wave of shimmering light pulsed outwards, and for a moment the air crackled with an almost unbearable intensity. Then a vision bloomed, not a clear image, but a fragmented tapestry of swirling colors and distorted faces. A chaotic montage of moments, a child's laughter, a warrior's death, a lover's embrace, all consumed by a profound, chilling sadness. Suddenly, a guttural cry erupted from the Orcish ranks. Torvin Bloodaxe, a young warrior renowned for his unwavering rage, stumbled backwards, clutching his head. "The pain! It's overwhelming!" he roared, his face contorted in agony. "I see it all, the battles, the losses, the deaths. It's too much." Reese and Kale immediately moved to restrain him, recognizing the danger. The tailor hadn't simply erased the memory of pain, he had resurrected it, amplifying it to unbearable levels. He preyed on the vulnerabilities, the regrets, Kale observed grimly. He didn't want to destroy time, he wanted to destroy the reason we experienced it. Lyra, however, saw an opportunity. We need to demonstrate the opposite. We need to embrace the weight of the present, to acknowledge the beauty and the sorrow, to reaffirm our connection to time itself. She turned to Borin. "Blacksmith, can you create a hammer, not for destruction, but for shaping? A tool that embodies the relentless, creative energy of the moment?" Borin, recovering his composure, nodded. Within moments he was hammering a piece of obsidian, shaping it with a focused, deliberate rhythm, not with fury, but with intention. As he worked, the others began to mirror his actions. Humans built intricate clockwork mechanisms. Elves wove tapestries depicting scenes of joyous celebration and somber reflection. And the orcs astonishingly forged simple, elegant tools for crafting and healing. The rhythmic clang of metal on metal, the precise movements of hands and tools, the collective focus on the doing, it was a defiant act of creation, a declaration that the present, with all its complexities, was worth fighting for. The resonance stones responded, their rhythmic pulse strengthening, shifting from melancholy to a hopeful cadence. The shadows around the figures began to lengthen and shift, no longer static and frozen, but imbued with a subtle sense of movement, a reflection of the restored flow of time. The war, it seemed, wasn't about reclaiming seconds, it was about remembering how to live them. Chapter 11. The Echo of Creation. The air in the central plaza of High Watch, once thick with the stench of war and desperation, now hummed with a quiet energy. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that, for the first time in months, seemed to linger a little longer, absorbing the residual echoes of the coup of the dawning. The remnants of the shattered chronometer totems lay scattered amongst the intricate clockwork devices crafted by the human night watchmen, while elven loom tenders meticulously wove patterns into silk, vibrant with scenes of harvest festivals and children's laughter. Borin's hammer, now polished to a deep obsidian sheen, rested on a makeshift anvil, a testament to the Orcish blacksmith's unexpected shift in focus. King Alaric, still visibly weary, observed the scene with a cautious hope. The war had aged him, etching deeper lines onto his face, but there was a newfound steadiness in his eyes. He had spent the intervening weeks listening to the reports from his advisors, but it was the tangible evidence of this changed approach that truly resonated. The rigid pronouncements of the Royal Astronomer-Royal, Lord Valerius, now a silent, petrified statue in the citadel, and the increasingly erratic pronouncements of the Orcish Iron-Shaman, Grok Stonefist, were replaced by a measured discussion of the future. A future that, for the first time in a long time, felt genuinely hopeful. "The resonance stones are responding with unprecedented vigor," reported Master Ilara, the Elven Regent, her silver hair braided with strands of shimmering thread. "The patterns we weave, the rhythms we establish, they amplify their energy. We believe we've begun to re-establish a connection to the flow of time itself." The shift wasn't merely aesthetic. The resonance stones, once dull and sluggish, now pulsed with a vibrant, almost palpable energy. Their rhythmic beat, a low, humming drone, initially had evolved into a complex, layered harmony, reflecting the orchestrated activities of the three nations. It was a song of creation, a testament to the power of embracing the present. A ripple of unease passed through the assembled ranks. The memory of the Tailor's insidious influence lingered, a cold shadow clinging to the edges of their victory. "We mustn't become complacent," warned Captain Lyra of the Night Watch, her hand resting on the hilt of her moonsteel sword. "The Tailor, though banished, still possesses the ability to manipulate time. We must remain vigilant, attuned to any disruption in the rhythm." Lyra's words were echoed by a younger night watchman, Reese, a boy barely out of his teens. "I've been studying the salvaged fragments of Valerius' notes," he announced, holding up a tattered scroll. He believed the Tailor wasn't simply stealing time, but corrupting it. He theorized that the discarded fragments, saturated with human hesitation and regret, were feeding a negativity that was actively unraveling the very fabric of reality. This revelation sparked a heated debate. Some argued for a continued aggressive approach, a constant, desperate effort to reclaim every lost moment. Others, swayed by Ilara's insights, advocated for a more nuanced strategy, not simply fighting the stolen time, but understanding its source, its nature. It was Boren who unexpectedly offered a solution. "The key," he rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of his forge-born wisdom, "is not to fight the echo, but to amplify it. We've spent so long focusing on the absence of time, on the void the Tailor created. We need to fill that void with creation." He gestured towards the bustling activity in the plaza, a tapestry of human ingenuity, elven artistry, and Orcish craftsmanship. "The Tailor sought to erase the future, to trap us in a perpetual, meaningless moment. We will show him that the future, and indeed the present, is not a static thing to be stolen, but a force to be shaped." As they continued to work, guided by Boren's simple directive, something extraordinary began to happen. The resonance stones resonated with a previously unheard-of intensity, bathing the plaza in a warm golden light. The shadows, no longer frozen in place, began to shift and ripple, reflecting the motions of the artisans and the intricate patterns they were creating. They seemed almost responsive, drawn to the collective act of creation. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine pierced through the harmonious pulse of the stones. Ilara gasped, her eyes wide with alarm. "The Tailor is attempting to re-establish his connection." A swirling vortex of gray mist materialized in the center of the plaza, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid form, the Tailor of Twilight. He was smaller than they anticipated, a shimmering silhouette woven from fractured moments, his voice a chorus of whispers, a cacophony of lost conversations. "You cannot escape the inevitability of entropy," he shrieked, extending a hand towards a newly woven tapestry depicting a joyful family gathering. "Your attempts to shape the present only prolong the inevitable decay. You will still lose to silence, to stillness, to the eternal now." But this time, the response wasn't fear. It was a unified, unwavering act of creation. The artisans, bolstered by the strength of the resonance stones, raised their tools, their faces set with determination. They continued to work, their movements fluid and purposeful, their creations a defiant celebration of the present moment. The rhythmic clang of metal against metal, the delicate touch of elven fingers on silk, the focused intensity of the human night watchman, it was a symphony of resistance, an echo of creation, resonating with the power of a restored time. The tailor, overwhelmed by the sheer force of their intentionality, began to unravel, his form flickering, his whispers fading, until he was finally consumed by the swirling gray mist, leaving behind only a faint scent of regret and forgotten seconds. Chapter 12. Echoes of the Weave. The silence that followed the tailor's dissolution was profound, broken only by the ragged breathing of the assembled forces. The plaza of Silverwood, once a nexus of simmering tension, now felt strangely cleansed, the air thick with the residue of a battle not fought but averted. Dust motes danced in the shafts of newly invigorated sunlight, a tangible representation of the timeline restored. Master Ilara, the elven loom tender, was the first to speak, her voice unusually husky. The resonance, it's stronger. The stones hum with a clarity I haven't felt since the fracturing began. She cautiously touched a resonance stone, a pulsating obsidian shard pulsating with a gentle internal light. The tailor's influence was a parasite, feeding on our inaction, our hesitation. Now we are nourishing the flow. Across the plaza, Torvin Stonehand, the Orcish blacksmith's apprentice, let out a grunt of satisfaction, wiping sweat from his brow. The Iron-Shaman's totems were like frozen nightmares, trapping the flow of momentum. Shattering them wasn't a glorious victory, but it was right. It felt like unleashing a river after holding it back for an age. He hefted a newly forged hammer, its head etched with intricate runes of raw energy. We can use this, can't we? To channel the now. The human night watchman, Silas, a man whose face held the grim weariness of countless sleepless nights, remained unusually quiet. He was perhaps the most profoundly affected by the events. He felt the weight of countless moments, lost and stolen, pressing down on him, a phantom ache in his soul. The Astronomer-Royal, his obsession with time was consuming. He saw only potential futures, probabilities, equations. He failed to understand the sanctity of this moment. He paused, his gaze fixed on the shattered remnants of the mirror that had once amplified the Royal's stolen time. We've glimpsed the abyss of potential, and we swore never to return. The Council of Three, composed of Ilara, Torvin, and Silas, recognized the immediate action. The disruption had been significant, and the potential for the tailor, or someone like him, to re-emerge remained a constant threat. Their first task was to reinforce the protective wards around Silverwood, now pulsing with amplified resonance stone energy, creating a shimmering shield that felt both ancient and impossibly new. We need to understand the extent of the damage, Ilara announced, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns on a newly constructed loom board, a device used to analyze the delicate threads of time. The tailor didn't just steal seconds, he warped the entire weave. There are ripples, echoes of his influence, pockets of altered temporal flow. Silas, guided by the Night Watch protocols ingrained in him, began to systematically scan the surrounding area with a specialized chronometer, a device salvaged from the Royal Observatory. The device pulsed with erratic energy, struggling to lock onto stable temporal signatures. The anomaly is strongest westward, he reported, his voice strained. Towards the Blacktooth Mountains. The tailor seems to have been actively drawing temporal energy from that region, specifically from the ancient mines where the Iron-Shaman conducted his research. Torvin, ever practical, prepared for a reconnaissance mission. He'll lead a scouting party. We need to find the source of this temporal drain and close it before it becomes a gaping maw. He adjusted his newly crafted hammer, its metal gleaming in the sunlight. This isn't just about stopping a villain. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of time itself. We're not just warriors, we're custodians of the present. As Torvin assembled his party, a dozen hardened Orcish warriors, each wielding weapons forged with an almost unsettling intensity, a tremor ran through the plaza. The resonant stones pulsed with a rapid, frantic rhythm, and the air crackled with static. From the western edge of the plaza, a column of gray mist began to coalesce, swirling with the same unsettling energy as the Tailor's previous manifestation. This time, however, it wasn't a humanoid figure. Instead, a shimmering tapestry began to unfold, depicting not a joyful gathering, but a desolate, monochrome landscape, a future ravaged by the unending tick of a frozen clock, a world where every moment was a tune. A voice, chillingly devoid of warmth, echoed across the plaza. "You think you understand time? You measure it, manipulate it, fight it, but you do not live it. I offer you eternity, unburdened by choice, unmarred by regret, untouched by the chaos of the now." Wah. The Loom-Masters braced themselves. This wasn't the Tailor's desperate plea. This was something far more insidious, a premonition, a temptation, a glimpse into the potential consequences of their victory. The fight for the future of time had just entered a terrifying new phase. Chapter 13. The looms echo the plaza of Viridian held its breath. The rhythmic pulsing of the resonant stones, once a frantic drumbeat of impending doom, had settled into a sickly, irregular throb. The tapestry, still unfurling, no longer depicted a bleak future with detached horror. Instead, it writhed, a kaleidoscope of gray reflecting the terror gripping the assembled forces. Torvin, his face etched with grim determination, tightened his grip on his hammer, the heat of its forging intensifying, a tangible force pushing back against the encroaching despair. "Silence!" he bellowed, his voice a guttural roar that cut through the stunned murmur of the Orcish warriors. "Observe. This isn't a warning of defeat. It's an invitation. The Tailor shows us a truth, a consequence of clinging too tightly to the now, of forcing a single rigid moment upon the river of time. He seeks to lull us into complacency, to convince us that our war is futile." Beside him, Lyra, the blacksmith's apprentice, shifted uneasily. Her normally steady hands trembled as she examined a shard of obsidian gleaned from the edges of the tapestry. It feels wrong, Torvin. Not just dark, but empty. Like a place where even the concept of sound has been erased. "Precisely, Kaelin." The elven loom tender stepped forward, his movements fluid and unnervingly precise. "The Tailor isn't simply stealing moments as dismantling the very fabric of experience, as offering us a prison of perpetual stillness." He gestured to the unraveling tapestry with a hand that moved with the grace of a falling leaf. "Look closely. You see fragments of our battles, our defeats, our triumphs, but they're muted, drained of their significance. It's a beautiful, horrifying echo of what could be." The human night watchman, Silas, a man sculpted from the harsh realities of Viridian's shadowed streets, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the tapestry. He was a man of few words, his presence a grounding force amidst the escalating panic. He had been the first to truly understand the implications of the Loom-Masters' actions, the chilling realization that the stolen seconds weren't just resources, but pieces of their very souls. "We cannot afford to be swayed by this illusion," Torvin continued, his voice regaining its unwavering conviction. "The Tailor believes he offers freedom from regret, from the burden of choice, but freedom without choice is merely stagnation. We fight for the right to make choices, for the messy, chaotic, beautiful potential of the future." Suddenly, the tapestry pulsed violently, and a new image materialized within its gray depths, a single, perfectly formed eye, staring directly at them. It wasn't a terrifying gaze, but one of profound sorrow, as if witnessing the agonizing waste of countless moments. "You misunderstand," a voice, softer than the tailor's previous pronouncements, whispered from the tapestry. I do not seek to erase your choices. I merely offer you respite. The burden of existence is heavy. Why endure the endless cycle of triumph and failure, of joy and despair, when you can simply... The resonant stones flared with an unbearable intensity, bathing the plaza in a blinding, shimmering light. When their vision returned, the tapestry had undergone a subtle change. The desolate landscape was still present, but now, tiny figures pale, indistinct representations of themselves moved within it, trapped in an endless, silent dance. They are echoes of what could be, Kalen gasped, his face paling. Versions of ourselves robbed of their agency, existing solely as observers of their own stagnation. The Loom-Masters realized, with a sickening clarity, that the premonition wasn't merely a threat, it was a reflection of their own ambition, their own desperate desire for control. The tailor wasn't just stealing time, he was exploiting their fear, their yearning for a simpler, predictable existence. Torvin slammed his hammer into the ground, the reverberation echoing through the plaza. Enough! This isn't a contest of wills. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of time itself. We are not meant to control it. We are meant to shape it, to guide its flow with our actions, our decisions, our lives. He turned to Silas, a rare flicker of understanding in his eyes. The Night Watchman, your training has taught you the value of observation, of anticipating the unpredictable. Now, you must apply that skill not to predicting the tailor's schemes, but to understanding the nature of this echo. Tell us, what is it truly craving? Silas, his usually impassive face etched with a newfound urgency, cautiously approached the tapestry. He reached out a hand, not to touch, but to listen. The air shimmered, and for a fleeting moment, he seemed to step into the tapestry's gray depths. It doesn't want to destroy, he whispered, his voice strained. It wants to be remembered. It's feeding on the forgotten moments, the unacknowledged regrets, the lost possibilities. It's a hunger for what was, what could have been, and what will never be. The realization hung heavy in the air, more terrifying than any image of a frozen future. The tailor hadn't simply sought to steal their time, had sought to devour their memories, to erase the very essence of what made them who they were. The fight for the future of time had become a fight for their souls. Chapter 14. The Echo of Regret. The Plaza of High Watch, usually a hive of frantic preparations and simmering hostility, fell silent. Torvin's impassioned speech had struck a chord, a resonance that ran deeper than the incessant clang of blacksmiths' hammers and the nervous chatter of scouts. Silas' revelation that the tailor wasn't simply a thief, but a ravenous collector of lost moments, had shifted the entire perception of the war. The War of the Stolen Seconds suddenly felt less like a territorial dispute and more like a theft of identity. So, it's not about power, but remembrance? Kalen, the elven loom tender, spoke, his voice a measured counterpoint to the raw energy of the moment. It seeks the echoes of what was, not to dominate the present, but to complete itself. He gestured to the slowly expanding tapestry, now pulsing with a dull gray light that seemed to absorb all surrounding color. It's like a broken song, desperately trying to find its missing notes. Torvin nodded, a grim satisfaction settling over him. Silas is right. The tailor isn't destroying time, he's consuming it. He's a parasite, feeding on the grief of forgotten promises, the shame of unfulfilled ambitions, the bitter taste of regret. He turned to Commander Rorik, a grizzled human veteran whose face bore the map of countless battles. Rorik, I want every scouting party focusing on locations of significant personal tragedy, places of loss, of broken oaths, of moments where the heart was truly laid bare. Let's saturate this echo with the raw material of what it craves. The initial reaction from the Orcish contingent, the Sun-Breaker Horde, was predictably volatile. Romak, the war chief, a mountain of scarred muscle and simmering fury, grunted, his hand instinctively reaching for the haft of his greataxe. Memories? Sentimentality? That's a weakness. We fight for glory, for conquest. These lost moments are nothing but a burden. But even Gromek faltered as Silas recounted his experience, the shimmering glimpse into the tapestry's gray depths. A flicker of something akin to discomfort crossed his face, quickly masked by a roar of renewed aggression. Very well, he conceded, but we will meet this hunger with force. We will create our own moments of profound regret, glorious defeats, crushing losses to feed the beast. Meanwhile, a quiet shift was taking place amongst the elven loom tenders, a group renowned for their meticulous observation and subtle manipulation of temporal threads. Lyra, the Princess-Regent's most trusted loom tender, approached the tapestry with a different kind of urgency. She wasn't listening to echoes of the past, she was seeking a pattern, a disruption. The weaving's not random, she announced, her fingers tracing intricate symbols etched into the fabric of the Loom-Masters control panel. The tailor isn't just gathering moments, he's orchestrating them. He's layering regrets, amplifying sorrows, creating a vortex of negativity. It's as if he's deliberately constructing a feast for himself. Then we must disrupt the feast, Torvin declared, his eyes gleaming with renewed purpose. We need to introduce chaos, uncertainty, agency into the equation. Something the tailor cannot predict, cannot consume. Silas, having spent the last hour studying the tapestry's shifting patterns, offered a startling suggestion. I believe he's looking for the simplest, most honest moments of joy. The unguarded laughter of a child, the comforting warmth of a shared meal, the quiet beauty of a sunrise. He's trying to eradicate them, not through destruction, but through emptying. Just then, a tremor ran through the plaza. The tapestry pulsed violently, and a swirling vortex of gray light erupted from its center, coalescing into a shimmering, spectral image, a young boy, no older than 7, laughing as he chased pigeons in a sun-drenched courtyard. The image was perfect, heartbreakingly so. Before anyone could react, the image shimmered and vanished. The tapestry's light dimmed, and the air grew cold. He's feeding on it, Rorik bellowed, raising his sword. Attack! Disrupt the source! But Torvin held up a hand. No! Don't attack. Don't try to win this battle. The key, as Silas suggested, is to offer an alternative. Let's give him a moment of genuine joy. Let's show him what he's desperately trying to erase. He looked to Kalen, a plan already forming in his mind. Loom Tender, I want you to unravel a section of the tapestry. Not to destroy it, but to reweave it. Create a new thread, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Let's offer him a taste of what is missing. The fate of time, it seemed, rested not on grand battles and shattered chronometers, but on a single deliberate act of offering a fragile counterpoint to the Tailor of Twilight's insatiable hunger for lost memory. Chapter 15. The Thread of Laughter, the Plaza of Silverhaven, once a battleground choked with the metallic tang of blood and the echoes of desperate shouts, was now a tableau of stunned disbelief. The vortex had vanished, leaving only a lingering chill and the faint scent of sun-baked stone. The remnants of the tapestry, shimmering like oil on water, lay scattered across the cobblestones, a grotesque echo of the impending doom. Rorik, the night watchman, gripped his sword tighter, his face etched with grim determination. He's learning, Torvin. He's understanding the value of these moments. He's not just stealing, he's selecting. Torvin, the Orcish blacksmith's apprentice, remained calm, his usually soot-stained face thoughtful. He observed Kalen, the elven loom tender, who was already meticulously working with a section of the shimmering fabric. Kalen moved with a grace born of centuries of weaving, his slender fingers dancing across the fractured threads, coaxing them into a new pattern. The air around him thrummed with a faint, almost musical energy, the residual magic of the Loom-Weave. The Astronomer-Royal wasn't simply hoarding time, Kalen murmured, his voice barely audible above the quiet hum of the repaired tapestry. He was curating it. The tailor seeks not just moments of hesitation, but specific emotions, particularly the intensely joyful. It's a horrifyingly precise obsession. The initial wave of panic had begun to subside, replaced by a cautious curiosity. The human guards, once bristling with readiness, now stood hesitantly, their swords lowered. The Orcish warriors, typically a roaring tide of aggression, were subdued, their heavy axes resting heavily against their sides. Even the elves, known for their cold detachment, seemed captivated by the delicate process unfolding before them. "What are you creating, Loom-Tender?" Lord Alaric, the High Watch commander, approached, his brow furrowed with concern. He was a pragmatic warrior, accustomed to battlefield strategies, and the notion of offering joy to a cosmic scavenger was profoundly unsettling. "I am not merely creating a pattern, Lord Alaric," Kalen replied, his voice gaining a touch of reverence. "I am weaving a memory. I am drawing upon the echoes of joy that remain in this reality, the laughter of children, the warmth of friendship, the beauty of a perfect sunset, and anchoring them to the tapestry. I am offering the tailor a glimpse of what he's trying to eradicate." As Kalen worked, the fractured section of the tapestry began to subtly shift. The gray, chaotic swirl resolved itself into a scene of breathtaking beauty, a sun-drenched courtyard filled with brightly colored flowers, a young boy, no older than 7, chasing a flock of pigeons, his face alight with unrestrained joy. The image wasn't manufactured, it was extracted from a genuine moment of happiness, a fleeting memory absorbed by the tailor and then painstakingly reconstructed. Suddenly, the vortex flared again, brighter this time, accompanied by a palpable surge of energy. The image solidified, becoming sharper, more vibrant. A low, guttural moan echoed through the plaza, a sound of something profoundly disturbed, something that instinctively recoiled from the offered joy. Rorik surged forward, raising his sword. "He's resisting. We have to attack. Overwhelm him with more images." Torvin stepped in front of him, his hand firmly on Rorik's sword hilt. "Wait! Rorik, you misunderstand. He doesn't crave chaos. He craves absence. By offering him something beautiful, we're demonstrating the very thing he's destroying." He gestured to Kalen, who continued to weave, now adding layers of detail to the scene: the smell of fresh-baked bread, the sound of distant music, the rough texture of a child's hand reaching out to touch a flower. "We're not fighting a monster, Rorik," Torvin said, his voice low and serious. "We're engaging in a conversation. We're showing him that existence isn't just about stolen seconds, it's about living them." As Kalen completed the weaving, he gently touched the finished portion of the tapestry. A wave of energy pulsed outwards, washing over the plaza. The air shimmered, and for a brief, glorious moment, the sun seemed to shine a little brighter. The birds sang a little sweeter, and the laughter of a child, faint but undeniably present, filled the air. The vortex, which had been flickering erratically, stabilized, then slowly began to recede, pulling the shimmering tapestry back into its original form. But something had changed. The gray light had dimmed, replaced by a subtle golden hue. And, as the last vestiges of the tapestry vanished, a single, perfectly formed sunflower, impossibly vibrant and radiating warmth, bloomed from the cobblestones where the vortex had been. Kalen looked at the sunflower, a small serene smile gracing his face. "He acknowledged us," he whispered. "He offered a piece of himself." The fate of tomorrow, it seemed, wasn't dependent on a single decisive action, but on a continuous delicate offering of beauty, joy, and the simple, unyielding truth of being present in the moment. The coup of the dawning hadn't been a battle won with steel and magic, but a conversation started with a thread of laughter.